It was the kind of evening where the city lights blurred like 1,000 tiny stars over Manhattan, but inside the exclusive restaurant, the atmosphere was tighter than a noose. Lila, a petite waitress with sharp green eyes and a spine of steel, balanced a tray of champagne flutes, feeling the weight of the malevolent stare of the room's most feared figure, Edward Blackwood, the billionaire who seemed to own the entire skyline. Edward had chosen tonight deliberately, to humiliate, to assert, to remind everyone who held the real power. He leaned back in his designer chair, fingers steepled, and smirked. "Bring me something special," he said in Russian, twisting the words in a way only meant to confuse and ridicule. His guests laughed nervously, the sound echoing like knives across Lila's consciousness. Lila's heart pounded, but she refused to falter. Years of working in this gilded cage taught her one thing: never show fear.
Hey guys, before we get into today's shocking story, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Today, a millionaire thought he could humiliate a waitress, but what she did next shocked everyone. Comment your country below, and trust me, the real shocking part is coming. You have to see it.
She had seen him crush careers, ruin reputations, and manipulate women into submission. But tonight, something in her simmered. Edward assumed she was just another timid girl who could be played like a pawn. When she approached, tray in hand, Edward leaned forward and repeated his mocking words, exaggerating the syllables, his tone dripping with condescension. "Did you even understand that, little girl?" he sneered, eyes glinting with cruel amusement. But Lila smiled, a slow, almost imperceptible curve of lips that promised he had no idea what he'd just unleashed. She bowed slightly, whispered something fluent back in Russian, and the room froze. Every guest turned, eyes widening. Edward's smirk faltered, replaced by a flash of disbelief. He wasn't expecting her to speak perfectly, not expecting her to flip the power dynamic in one whispered sentence. Lila walked away as if nothing had happened, but inside her mind was racing. This was just the beginning. Humiliation, he thought, was a weapon he wielded, but for every insult, every sneer, Lila was already calculating her revenge, a revenge he wouldn't see coming. Over the next few weeks, Lila observed Edward carefully. Every pattern, every weak spot, every time his arrogance showed, she took mental notes. Edward was a man who loved control, who thrived on crushing anyone beneath him, and yet he had one blind spot. He underestimated those he deemed insignificant. She started small, correcting orders before he even realized mistakes, quietly fixing problems his assistants failed to notice. Guests began to notice her efficiency, her composure under stress. Edward, on the other hand, remained oblivious, assuming she was still the same timid waitress he could mock at will. One night, during a high-stakes investor dinner, Edward began mocking her again, this time in French. He exaggerated, laughed, and expected the room to join him. Lila's eyes glinted. She replied fluently, correcting his grammar and using humor to subtly expose his ignorance. The laughter this time shifted away from her and toward him, soft, polite at first, then growing louder. Edward's face flushed, the first cracks appearing in his otherwise perfect armor. Lila didn't celebrate. She had learned patience. True revenge is slow, deliberate, and inevitable. Over time, she let him make small mistakes in meetings, subtle manipulations that made him lose credibility among his investors. She built allies quietly, gaining loyalty from the staff and even some of his business rivals, all while maintaining the image of the obedient, unassuming waitress. Every act, no matter how minor, was calculated. Every smile she gave him was a mask. She was learning his weaknesses, mapping his arrogance, and plotting the ultimate reversal. It was the annual Blackwood Gala, the event where Edward shined like a golden god. Lila was assigned to serve, as usual. The chandeliers reflected perfectly off the polished marble floor, and the city skyline served as a backdrop for Edward's empire. He was in top form, commanding attention, laughing at jokes, and yes, mocking her in Italian this time. She walked over, tray steady, heart calm. But tonight, the stage was hers as much as his. She subtly triggered the digital presentation Edward had prepared for investors, a slideshow filled with embarrassing typos, inaccurate statistics, and some carefully planted faux contracts. As the room murmured, Edward's face turned a shade darker. And then she spoke, fluent, confident, and unapologetically mocking in each of the languages he had used to belittle her before. The room gasped. Investors exchanged looks. Edward's arrogance, his carefully cultivated aura of invincibility, shattered in real time. "Do you see now?" Leela whispered, leaning close so only he could hear, "how it feels to be underestimated?" Humiliation washed over him. He was powerless, exposed, and everyone in the room noticed. Leela walked away with the same calm poise she always maintained, leaving him swallowing his ego, unable to retaliate. The crowd, previously laughing at her, now admired her intelligence, bravery, and subtle power. Edward realized, too late, that his dominance had been reversed, silently, strategically, and weeks after the gala, Edward attempted to regain control. He called her into his office, expecting submission, apologies, perhaps even tears. Instead, he found a woman transformed, confident, untouchable, radiant with victory. "You've humiliated me enough," he said, attempting to regain dominance. Lila smiled. "No, Edward, I didn't humiliate you. You humiliated yourself. I simply made sure the world saw it." She handed him a small folder. Inside were all his mismanaged contracts, manipulated deals, and evidence of his arrogance, carefully documented and leaked to the right investors. Edward paled. Deals were falling apart. Allies were questioning loyalty. His empire, built on fear, began to wobble. Lila walked out, leaving him in a quiet room filled with whispers of his own downfall. As she stepped onto the street, the city lights felt different, brighter, freer. She had taken the power back, not with fists or anger, but with intelligence, strategy, and patience. Edward would never see her as a little girl again, and more importantly, he would never see her coming, exactly how revenge should be executed.